Oh, howdy all, grab yourself a drink, it is time for some Path of Exile discussion. Today I wanted to outline a strategy that I believe is pretty beginner friendly and is something that I was doing during the recent player run event Badger Private League. This is farming Divination cards in maps using abysses in order to multiply your loot. Now Badger Private League is a player run event with some odd rules, and that's the reason that you'll see that I have Metamorph and Elva on my atlas. What you need for this strategy to work is the Northern Abyss crack in its entirety, the Abyssal Army node towards the center that provides increased number of monsters per abyss, that's very important, and the south cluster that increases the chances of finding an abyss at random. That's all you need. After that, some of the other mechanics you might want to spec into, you go with shrines, you go with strongboxes. One thing I think does synergize pretty well is Breach, and that's because Breach and Abyss are on the same side of the tree, and both of them add a lot of monsters to the map. And that's our goal here. We are looking to multiply loot in 3 different ways, all of which stack. The first one is through the use of Divination scarabs. A rusted Divination scarab is a 50% more multiplier to the amount of Divination cards that drop in your maps. A polished scarab 100% more, a gilded scarab 150% more, and the very expensive winged scarabs are a 250% more multiplier to your div cards. In practice, as this is a more introductory strategy and a low investment strategy, I'm going to recommend that you stick to the rusted and maybe polished scarabs here. Then we're going to be using the Abyss passive tree support. What this is doing is it's about adding more monsters on average to every abyss that we find. Then we're going to be using an Abyss scarab to get potentially a little bit more of that stat if we use a polished or higher scarab. But additionally, we're going to be using it in order to increase the number of abysses that we get per map. Instead of getting roughly 1 abyss every second map, we're going to be getting 1 abyss every map and a second abyss in about every second map. So this is 3 different layers of more multipliers here: abysses per map, monsters per abyss, and divination card drops per monster. These all multiply together, and that's the core of the strategy. You'll notice in the background footage, I'm running 2 Terrace maps here. We'll get to why it's Terrace maps in a sec. I don't really recommend that in a mature trade league, but it was perfect for the Badger Private League event. I'm picking up every divination card that drops. Now, there's been a bunch of testing that's been done in the last year on divination card drop rates. I'll put a link down in the description of the video below to PoorFishWife's excellent research on this, and also I'll put a link down in the description again to my video on what I believe to be the biggest player discoveries about Path of Exile in 2022. That also discusses this research. Now, this research was done in 3.18, and some things have changed since then. For example, the drop rate of Humility, the divination card for Tabula Rasa, has unquestionably been nerfed, and it's been nerfed hard. However, it seems like it's only divination card drop rates for unique items that have been nerfed or buffed in this period. So for example, Humility is rarer than it used to be. The Thaumaturgist, a divination card for a 1 implicit corrupted Chevron's Revelation ring, this is much more common than it used to be. The Spark and the Flame, divination card for Beric's Respite, much more common than it used to be. So the unique ones have all been reshuffled, but the ones for other things, and that's everything you're going to see in Terrace map, they're pretty much unchanged. Now, PoorFishWife's findings were that the drop weighting of Emperor's Luck is about 50,000, for Rain Tempter about 12,000, for her mask about 10,000, and for the Porcupine about 4,000. Now what this means is that for every 18 of the common undesirable cards you get, you would on average get about 1 Porcupine. And this matched my experience in Badger Private League, where I was picking up every copy of the Emperor's Luck for a while, and tracking them against the number of Porcupines that I got, and it was pretty close to a 25-to-2 ratio, as per Fishwife's predictions. So what sort of typical results will you get if you do this strategy? Now, if you run no scarabs, you can expect to get about 1 Porcupine card every 5 maps, using the atlas that you see me running with here. That includes a shrine in every map and an abyss in every second map or so. If you're chasing a different card instead of the Porcupine, you can divide 20,000 by that card's weighting, and that'll give you a bit of an estimate as to how many maps on average it'll take you to find that card. For example, the Dapper Prodigy, which is an excellent divination card to chase for a 6-link chest armor that is item level 100. This divination card has a weight somewhere in the vicinity of 2,500, so you can expect to find one about every 8 maps. Now with a rusted divination scarab and a polished abyss scarab, it's been my experience that you get a little bit less than double the base amount of divination cards. With a polished abyss scarab, but still staying with the rusted divination scarab, which is the most budget-friendly setup you can go with, this will get you a little bit less than triple the base map divination card drops. And then if you decide to go to polished and polished, you get a little bit less than quadruple, somewhere between 3.5 and 4 times the standard number of divination cards you'd get. One thing may seem like a logical next step here, and that is going up to gilded or winged divination scarabs. The thing is that those are in really hot demand from other players at the moment, and they're also something that in SSF you might want to hold off until you can do an ultra juice mapping strategy. So I would generally say hold on to those for the time being. That said, if you are in a large group with other players and those other players all agree that the tileset specific divination cards belong to you, then in that situation, you might decide that it is worth your while using a gilded divination scarab or a winged divination scarab, and that's because extra players are a loot multiplier. What divination cards should you be chasing? Now, I'm chasing the Porcupine here. It's what I was doing in Badger Private League. It was what my team needed me to do in order to help gear up our players. However, if you're playing in a mature trade league, there is pretty much one right choice as to a divination card to chase now, and that is the Apothecary. When you compare it to potentially farm-worthy, more common cards like the Porcupine, the Apothecary is somewhere in the 400 to 800 times rarer range than these cards, but it's often 5,000 times as valuable. The Apothecary is only twice as rare as the Soul, we believe now, since 3.20, but it's 30 times the value. It's about 100 times as rare, I think, as the Patient, but about 300 or more times as valuable, etc., etc. Ultimately, the Apothecary simply gives you the best bang for your buck. Even though it's an extremely rare drop, even though the vast majority of play sessions you won't get lucky and find an Apothecary, the chance of getting one is still high enough to warrant doing it over pretty much anything else. Now, there are 4 maps that can drop the Apothecary, although they won't all be on the Atlas in any given league. These are Crimson Temple, Crimson Township, Defiled Cathedral, and Haunted Mansion. The Apothecary is also drop restricted at level 75 plus. What this means is that you can only get an Apothecary drop if the monster drops item level 75 or above loot. This is every rare or unique monster in level 73 and higher zones, so tier 6 and up. It is every magic monster in tier 7 and up zones, and it is every single monster in tier 8 and up zones. For example, one of the best options that you've got in 3.20 is a 1 Voidstone Atlas with Haunted Mansion, in which case Haunted Mansion will be a tier 9 map, and therefore every monster in the tileset can drop it. But I'll leave it up to you as to which of these specific maps you elect to run. Go with the one you find the most fun. And this is going to remain the case until GGG close the gap between Mageblood and everything else that you could put in the belt slot. Headhunter is often competitive for some uses, but Mageblood is just more powerful all around. And the best are the belts. Things like Deity and Dawn, Darkness Enthroned, or a really well-rolled rare Stygian Vice. None of these can hold a candle to the power of Mageblood. And that's a real problem because it means that Mageblood farming is simply the best use of rare consumables like Gilded and above Divination Scarabs. But you can definitely use this strategy to chase Apothecary cards and give yourself a much better chance of getting them than Elk and Go. Now let's say you wanted to take this up to the moon. Let's say that you wanted to scale this strategy far further than you've seen in this video. How would you go about doing it? In this situation, I would change the Atlas to include 3 mechanics. You still want all the Abyss content that we were discussing. You want all the Breach content. And then the third thing you want is either the Delirium Mirror or Delirium Layers. You're going to pick one of those two, and then the rest of your investment is going to be dictated by which one you chose. If you chose to go with the Delirium Mirror, then you're going to be using the Kirak mod to force Delirium on maps that you run. And if you chose to go with the Delirium Layers approach, you're instead going to want to apply 5 Delirium mobs to the maps that you're running. Obviously, this will require a super powerful character, and then you're going to want to upgrade your Scarabs to Gilded or Winged, and throw a Breach Scarab in there, and potentially some other mechanic as well. Delirium's really good as an additional source of more monsters on the map, and also as somewhat of a loot multiplier, and it has its own rewards as well. So that would be how I would scale this strategy up to the moon if that's what you want to do, but you don't need to do that for it to be effective. Anyways, that is the basics of Abyss Magic Find mapping. If you've got any comments or questions, definitely fire away down below. Otherwise, I'm going to leave it there. May your Varlorbs have interesting results.